Okay, so here we go. How many of you would like to have freedom? We all talk about freedom. We all want freedom. We want to be able to do what we want to do, when we want to do, and how we want to do it, because we're in America, land of the free, right? We all want to just express ourselves and let it all out. So I've kind of adapted from Steve Martin. Some of you still remember Steve Martin, okay. Oh, he's on Broadway now, okay. So here, it's called the individuality oath, because we all want to be individuals, right? So here we go. You ready? Please raise your right hand and say together, I state your name, want to be completely individual. You didn't get it yet? Exactly. Some people are starting to figure it out. I want to be so unique, I did the same thing everybody else in the room did. And that's exactly what I want to bring out. Because we claim we want to be free, and yet in so many ways we are not free. We are trapped, we act the same, we do the same, etc. So we're here this morning to understand what real freedom is, which in essence is just to be what the Creator created us. There's not one human being, including identical twins, that don't have a unique aspect of their soul. That is not a unique being created by the Creator with unique talents and abilities, thoughts and perspectives, etc. And to truly be free, that's what it means. Free to express who I really am. Not who other people want me to be, not who I think I should be, or people have told me, but who the Creator created me to be. So that's where we've got to start. That's where we've got to keep in mind. That's our goal. It's not just to be unlike everybody else. Because we just saw that sometimes in our desire to be not like everybody else, we are exactly like everybody else. And then you swing. It kind of goes in waves. First, here's the establishment, and then we're going to be anti-establishment. Of course, everybody who wants to be anti-establishment doing the same thing. Then they want to come back establishment again. You follow the pattern and we keep going back. It just looks different, but in one way or another, we're all doing the same thing. We're doing the same thing because that's what we've been caught up in this world. So this morning we want to start being free. But I also want to interject a thought from Kabbalistic understanding that what happens, unfortunately, also along the way with that swinging and that swaying from one aspect to the next, is people will be raised in a certain way, a certain tradition, and through that tradition, they start to find themselves constricted. I don't like the rules, I don't like the laws, I don't like the dogma, I don't like the ritual. And so then what happens? They swing away into something called spirituality. Because spirituality is kind of anything you want to do. Anything you want to do under the thought of, I'm connecting to the Creator of the universe. So I hug the trees, I meditate on the beach, I chant, etc. But that also, let me ask you, most people when they go down that path, they've left tradition because of the rules, so they think spirituality has no rules, right? It's free to do whatever you want. So I was thinking this morning, what would happen if just, not us, but a group of people this size decided to drive on the street any which way they wanted, no rules? We'd have nice and harmony. Right? There'd be no car accidents. Everyone would get to where they wanted to go because they're all following their own path. Yes or no? No, of course not. So we all want rules on the road so that we can all get, ideally, from one place to the other without accidents, without any incident, without any harm. So the same thing the Kabbalists teach us about spirituality. Spirituality is not just a lack of rules or regulations or what we call technology. It's understanding what the meaning behind the technology is. That's the idea. If you do something unconsciously, like my teacher Rav Berg used to talk about people driving the same route, let's say to go to work. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, they're driving the same way, home to work, work to home, back and forth. So he says after a couple years, they get in the car, and the next microsecond, they show up at work. So who drove the car? because we drove unconsciously. We just got caught in the habit that we're unconscious while we're driving. So spirituality is not a lack of system or technology. It's the understanding what is the technology so we can all benefit. We can all arrive at our uniqueness. What we're understanding this morning is true freedom, to be the light being, the co-creator that God created us to be. That's what we want to be. But there is a system. There is technology to it. It's not just freewheeling anything we want to do. As we always say, if there's technology in the physical world, as simple as to dial your cell phone, you can't do anything you want on your cell phone and expect to get the person you want. So if there's technology physically, there has to be technology from the upper worlds that physical technology is based on. And that, in essence, is what Kabbalah is. So we're going to start understanding first not what is freedom, other than what we've said. That it's free to be what the Creator created me to be, created each and every one of us to be. But let's start understanding what real bondage is, what real prison is, what real enslavement is. And so we go back to the Bible. And it's interesting how everything coincided this week. Because this Friday night, the cosmic event we're about to talk about is occurring in 2016, the full moon of Aries, which is actually the energy of freedom. But let's understand what we were free from. So the Bible talks about that Moses took the Israelites out of bondage of Egypt. So we've all seen the movies, right? We watch television, and of course everything on television is 100% fact. Exactly. So what do they tell us? You see the poor Israelites, they're enslaved, they're being beaten, it's horrible, it's terrible, and finally along comes this leader Moses and takes them out of Egypt, and we call that the Exodus. And then thousands of years later, some people with a traditional mind are still connecting to that. Well, we've got to remember when our ancestors were freed from Egypt. But let's ask ourselves, what is the bondage in Egypt? If it was so horrible, then why almost every day for 40 years, when we left Egypt until we got to the land of Israel, almost every day we were complaining to Moses, Moses, why did you take us out of Egypt? We told you to leave us alone in Egypt. You want us to die of starvation, you want us to die of hunger, you want us to die of thirst in the desert? Or better, there were not enough graves in Egypt, you had to take us out into this God-forsaken desert to die here? That was the complaint. And then they'd say, we told you to leave us alone in Egypt because we had meat, we had fish, we had watermelon, we had all this great food. So how terrible could the bondage have been? So let me ask you this. We'll get a little more personal. How many of you know people, because of course it's not us, you leave your cell phone at home by mistake and you arrive at work? How many people do you know who feel like they left their right arm somewhere? Or they just can't go without their cell phone? Or they can't stop getting on the computer? They're addicted to social media. I'm not saying it's bad. Get it in the right understanding. But there's a difference between somebody who cannot let go or people who are stuck. Couch potatoes, television. Oh, I can't miss that show. Don't ask me to help you during that show because that show I cannot miss. Because of course there's no such thing in 2016 as a recording that you could watch it the next day. But you're getting the idea? People are enslaved to the television, to the computer, to things like that, their cell phone. Or maybe a little more of us, we might be enslaved to people's opinion of us, taking things personally, our own fears, our own compulsions, or you'll hear yourself, we'll all say, couldn't help myself. Couldn't help myself. They made me do it. So then what are you saying? You're enslaved. You're enslaved to those things. And that's what we want to understand. The slavery of Egypt was not the slavery of being beaten and terrible torture and torment. It was slavery to luxury. It was slavery to materiality. When people couldn't let the material world go. That was the idea. They were enslaved in essence to their ego and their selfishness. And just for a note, because a few people have asked over the last couple weeks, because we have the big round thing out there in the bookstore, matzah. So if you think about it, matzah, what is matzah? It's bread that hasn't been leavened. What we understand Kabbalistically, that bread represents the desire to receive for oneself alone, the ego, right? Because bread to rise, it has to take in. Matzah is just flour and water. So it's also the same material without the rising. And so the Kabbalists say that as this cosmic event enters in this Friday, the full moon of Aries, then eating the matzah in place of bread becomes the antidote or a curative for the ego and the selfishness. And that's why we, over the years, have developed our own matzah. We make it ourselves. I don't want to give you the whole process, but needless to say, it's done with all the Kabbalistic understanding to help us take ourselves out of that slavery and bondage to our ego and our selfishness. That's the power of the matzah. But to understand, that's what Egypt was. People who can't leave their business. I had a student once, a few years back in LA, who told me his business was dependent on him. He couldn't leave it because he knew if he left it, the business would fall apart. So who was the owner? Was he the owner of the business or did the business own him? So unfortunately for him, what happened was his father had a heart attack. So he stayed, of course, by his father's bedside for a week. After the week, he went back to work, and guess what? The business was just fine. Just fine. So the slavery that we are all in some way, shape, or form is not the slavery of anyone or anything outside of us. It's the slavery or the prison we put ourselves into by whatever aspect. I can't leave, I can't do this, I can't help myself, what would happen if I don't, what will they say, etc. It's of our own making. There is no prison on the outside. I mean, there are people who are literally in a jail that could be freer than a lot of people living in the lap of luxury. Because it's not about the physical circumstances, as we affirm every morning. Consciousness is everything. Consciousness will determine imprisoned or not. So now we can start on the path to freedom, which is the idea. So then it's no longer freedom from everything or everyone else. It's freedom to be ourselves. It's freedom to let go and to be who we are created to be. And that's where we want to start. So then what's the real freedom? If we're talking about freedom from our addictions, compulsions, our ego, and our selfishness, then we've got to start understanding that real freedom means free choice, free will. We've been given by God free will, but unfortunately, we don't use it. We don't use it. I can't help myself. I have to act this way. People are forcing me to. Whatever it may be, we are not using, or like I said, we just drive unconsciously, or we'll do things unconsciously. We can eat breakfast unconsciously. After you've eaten, you look back and say, wow, did I eat all that? So who was eating it? So we have free will, we just don't use it. Now we have to wake up and start using it. But in order to have free will, and this is the glitch, at least initially, till you really grasp this concept, free will means we have to have at least two choices. The choice to be compulsive or the choice to be conscious. If you don't have those two choices, there's no free will. If there were no choice to act with a compulsive nature, then what effort would it be to act consciously? And if there's no effort, there's no gain. No effort, no gain. It's a Kabbalistic concept. You cannot grow spiritually if you're not exerting yourself to be more godlike. But in order to exert yourself, you have to have at least some temptation to be caught in the illusion of desire, the illusion of ego, the illusion of selfishness, the illusion of compulsions or addictions or my TV or whatever. And you know what? There'll be a wonderful voice on the left side of our head that will give us all the justification for it. What am I supposed to do without my cell phone? How am I going to make a telephone call? How am I going to call my clients, my boss, how people get in touch with me? I'll lose business. Well, some of you were around when there were no cell phones. Few of us. Did we manage to get along? Did business run? Did the world move? Right? Could we live without the cell phone? No. Oh, okay, if you're in the business of cell phone, I guess, okay. But everyone's understanding the idea. We have done it. Again, I'm not saying not to have a television or use your computer, etc. It's the consciousness behind it. If you're addicted to it, then it's controlling you, and then that's not freedom. That's not freedom. So then, yes, we have free will, and now we have to use it. So something I just heard recently in a recorded lesson from my teacher from years back, Rav Berg, he says, what's real freedom? The essence of our free will is the ability of saying no to my addictive, compulsive nature. What we call in Kabbalah the restriction, or you can call it the pause. I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling upset at that person, and of course the old me just yell and scream and let it all out. The new me, with free will feel like I want to let it all out and scream, but I'll stop and I'll pause. Because if I don't stop and I don't pause, I can't be conscious. Because the old habit of screaming, yelling, falling down and crying, calling people names, being angry, resentful, feel guilt and shame, that's automatic. You don't have to think about it. But then if you're not thinking about it, you're enslaved to it. So when you can stop and you can pause and say, wait a second, do I want to give away my free will? Do I want to be enslaved again like I was in Egypt 3,400 years ago? Or do I want to be free today? To be the being that the Creator created me to be. To act like we affirm, with greater love, compassion, and kindness, forgiveness and tolerance and care for people. The only way I can do that and shift gears is when I'll pause. And that's the essence of my free will. Because then, if you're understanding it now clearly, or more clear, once you pause, the Creator nature that's within us is already within us. So I can choose with my free will to act with my Creator nature, conscious, or I unconsciously have chosen by habit and experience to just act in my compulsive, addictive, Egypt, slave nature. It's one or the other. So the difference and the essence of our free will is to be able to pause. Because it takes strength, it takes consciousness even to pause. I have a student who's been studying here for a few years. He was just telling me this morning how he let his ego get in the way again. Something happened. He went to a store. He was trying to get something. They had it set out for him. And then the store had a fire. They took what he had bought at a certain price, put it back on the shelf when they were redoing the store because of the fire. Then they called him up and said, now you can come pick it up. Now they wanted to charge him more. Because in the 2-3 days while they were fixing the store, the price of that thing had gone up. So he says he let his ego get in the way and he started to get angry. And he's threatening the person at the counter. I'm going to call your manager, da-da-da. And then he tells me why. Because when he grew up, his parents taught him, and obviously, therefore, he'd seen it a lot, that if you act with anger and aggressive and scream and yell, you'll get your way. So I looked at him, I said, really, did you get your way? He said, no. The more I screamed and yelled, the person at the counter got more obstinate and more angry back. I said, exactly. How would you feel if somebody came to attack you? Are you going to say, here, sure, come? Or you're going to say, no, 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 no. You're going to start feeling, right, like defensive. So of course you can't do that. So he understood the idea, but our habits, our experience, our past get in the way. And that's why, yes, it takes tremendous consciousness. And that's why we do what we do here with the tools and the technology to give us the strength to be able to pause in that moment. Because after 30, 40, 50 years of that training and that habit, it's not easy even just to stop. Forget now trying to act with tolerance or compassion for the person, but even just to start it with stopping. Stop before you get angry. Stop before you cry. Stop before the guilt and the shame and the resentment. Stop. Let the consciousness of the Creator become louder in your head, so it's easier then to express the consciousness of the Creator. But we've got to stop. Go back to the Bible. Very interesting story. Joseph. Some of you know the whole story. Joseph went through a lot of difficulties and problems, etc. He showed a lot of ability to stop and pause and look at things in a good way, till it came to this one incident. They say, just that you'll have a little more background, Joseph was so handsome Joseph of the Bible. Okay, don't look at the person here. Okay. Joseph of the Bible was so handsome. He was working as a servant in the house of Potiphar, his name is, one of the leaders of Egypt, that when he would walk into a room, right, the wife and all her friends who were preparing lunch, this is how it's written, and they were chopping vegetables, they would look at him and they were so enamored with his good looks, they would literally chop their finger off and not feel it because they were so enthralled with his looks. That's how he was. Now, here comes one day, he's alone in the house with his boss's wife. She had designs on him. She taunted and tempted and everything. And finally, he's getting ready. He's feeling the temptation. And what happened? In that moment, it says he was able to pause. And the pause saved his life. He was able to stop himself in that moment and run away. Yeah, exactly. Okay, I'll leave you to the rest of that conclusion. But this is the idea, to be able to stop and pause and then act like the Creator, act like the Creator that we are, what the Creator's given us. As we say, express your light nature. So I had a student, just to bring it a little more perhaps to our level. Okay. So I had a student who was having difficulty with his boss at work. He thought he was a good employee. He had a lot of great ideas, and he kept trying to get his boss to, let him express his ideas in the business meetings. And it looked to him that slowly, he's being left out of the business meetings. Not only not allowed to speak, but also like not being invited. So he starts to get a little upset. He's getting angry because now it's affecting his business and his perception of what could happen in his future, being promoted or moving up in the ranks, etc. So of course he happened to be learning in the center, decided to change his way of being. Instead of just jumping and screaming and telling his boss off or trying to get in there like that, he decided to practice what we're talking about. He took the pause and he says, you know what, let me just be kind to my boss. So whatever he did, he smiled more, he was nicer to the boss, he acted with kindness, etc. And sure enough, slowly, the boss not only invited him to the meetings, but also gave him an opportunity to express his ideas. And he knew from his past experience, had he done it his usual way, he'd probably be looking for another job, because that's how he was. So he was also able to change his nature. But remember, when we're talking about the freedom to choose, understand the choice is only the pause. Because the nature of our ego already exists. The nature of our light beingness already exists. So those are already there. We don't have a choice of those two things, but we can choose between them. Is everyone following the idea? They're both there. They're both talking to us all the time. We've gotten used to listening to the voice of our ego, being caught in the things I can't let go of. And now our job is to stop and then turn the channel to that which is the light, with our true nature and our true light beingness. And that's where we want to start going. That's what we want to start expressing now. To have freedom to be who I am, who the Creator created me to be, and use my ability to create a new life. That's in our hands. It says in the writings, every day the world is made new. But it's up to us to be new with the world. It's like every day the slate is cleaned. So we wrote on the board yesterday, we can clean it this morning and write what we want. The sad part is, when it's erased, what do we usually wake up and do? We write the same thing we wrote yesterday. We act in the same way, we have the same perspectives. We don't change ourselves so the world looks the same, even though it's new every day. So a few things I want to share with you about how we can start to change ourselves, how we can start to awaken and make use of our freedom. One is to realize, and it's a big shift for many of us, and very profound, we are all in a one-to-one relationship with the Creator. We're not in a group relationship. We can work together, but every human being on earth has a one-to-one with the Creator. And that's why consciousness is everything, because my consciousness determines my future. I can allow other people to influence my choices, but they cannot make the choice for me. I'm in one-to-one. And therefore, the more I can hold that in my consciousness, the less I have to worry about what other people think or what other people are doing. If they want to do the compulsive, addictive, enslaved action, that's their right. That's their freedom. But I don't have to. They can be in the midst of their chaos and their negativity, and I can be free. I can be in an oasis of peace and harmony and joy in the midst of all the chaos going around. That's the one-to-one. So it starts to alleviate some of our self-consciousness, some of our concern about what they're saying, what they'll do, or how they're acting. Or how can I not behave like them after what they did? Like the guy at the store. He got angry, so the person at the counter got angry. So who was enslaved? Both. But I guarantee you they both didn't realize it. It was just automatic behavior. The second part, when we can feel happy with nothing but the light, then we have true freedom. If we're dependent on the car I drive, the job I have, the clothes I wear, and all of the other things that in many ways are dictated to us, right? Isn't that what advertising is about? You have to drive this car, smoke this cigarette, live in this place, act this way, do this, etc. So they're trying to enslave us. And I'm, again, not against advertising. We have the conscious ability to choose what we want and don't if we'll use it. But they're, in essence, forms of allowing us or attempting us to be enslaved. So when we can feel happy, what the Kabbalists call like the zero state, when we can understand we are created as just empty containers, what we call vessels, and the light of the Creator fills us, but I'm just a vessel that has the choice to act like the light or not act like the light. But I'm just a vessel, and I'm happy with the light that I have, then I can channel the light, I can act with greater love, kindness, and compassion, and the universe will reflect that back to me. And then I'm no longer a slave to my house, my car, my job, or anything in the physical material. Again, doesn't mean we shouldn't have it, but we want to own it and not be owned by it. I may have shared with some of you the story. Years ago, I had a producer who was at one point very famous in Hollywood, right? He was my student, and he tells me like this. He says at peak of his fame and his fortune, he had 3 or 4 houses around the country, and of course he had cars at each one, and he says what he started to realize was that he was a slave to that property. Because so much of his day was spent on taking care of the house, and then when he had guests, which guests would stay in which house, which guests would stay in which rooms of the house, which cars would be at which house, etc., that he realized he was no longer the owner of the homes. They owned him. He was doing the bidding of the house and the property and the cars. So he said he got rid of everything, except the house he lived in and the car he drove. And then he would teach all of his employees, as I share with you, if you drive to a restaurant and you leave the keys of your car with the valet, and while you're at dinner or you're at that meal with friends or business, if all you can do is keep thinking about what the valet is doing with your car, then it's too much car for you. So the same thing goes with anything. If you can't get away from the TV, the car, the job, the house, or whatever, then it's too much. And you need to divest yourself spiritually to be free. And that's why my teacher, the Rav, would say, when we can, even in the midst of all the things, material things we could have, if you can feel and have in your consciousness that you are just the vessel, and it's the Creator giving us all these things just in order to share, in order to be conduits, in order to be examples of spirituality over materiality for all the other people. Because let's face it, if only poor and impoverished people in horrible states of existence were spiritual, how many of us would naturally feel to be spiritual? Because we relate spirituality with having nothing. But when you can see people who have all the material things, but they're not slaves to it, they are now still spiritual. They are happy to share and to give and offer to others and be kind and helpful to other people and have the material. Now that's something we can say, that I want to aspire to. Like Joseph. After all the enslavement he went through physically, but free in his consciousness, he ultimately became the leader of the known world because he was second to Pharaoh and in control of all the wealth that Egypt had, which was basically the wealth of the world. So spiritual people don't have to be impoverished. Don't let that negative side on the left of your brain tell you that that's what spirituality is. It's not. Moses was one of the richest people ever in history. Every gold mine, every sapphire mine, every diamond mine was his. God would tell him, Moses, here's the gold mine. Take what you need to build the tabernacle in the desert and to build these different things. The rest is yours. Here's a sapphire mine. Take what you need to build and the rest is yours. So wealth and spirituality can go together. It's not a question of two separate things, but then it goes back to our consciousness. Are we going to be free or are we going to allow ourselves to be enslaved? And the tricky thing is, when we don't have, and I don't mean in the really bad situations, but kind of usual, when we don't have and then we say, yes, of course, if I had, I'd be happy to share and I'd be happy to give. Start studying people. Sometimes, and unfortunately it's most, when they start to get a little more, a little more, a little more, a little more, they get trapped in it. How do we become slaves in Egypt? We started out with Jacob. Jacob was free. Jacob knew that there was light to be revealed by going into Egypt. So he went with 70 people, 70 relatives. They went into Egypt to collect the light and take it out, reveal light through the darkness. But what happened is, over the generations, they got caught in the negativity of ego, of selfishness, of materiality, and that's where we then come to the story of being enslaved in Egypt. It wasn't overnight. It was slowly, slowly, slowly. The Zohar says, the Kabbalists write, it's like a spider weaving a web. It's not there in 1 minute. First there's one string, then a little while later another string, and then another, and slowly, slowly it builds up till it traps the spider, or it traps the fly, rather. And so the same thing with our own egos. We have to be careful, and that's why we're here to awaken our consciousness. The more conscious we are, the more we have the capability to have the material things without being enslaved to it, which is the freedom we're all looking for. Because the Creator wants to give us, has already given us more abundance and more things than we could ever imagine. But we have to prove that we're capable of having it and sharing it at the same time, then it will be ours. Up to that point, it may come and go, which doesn't make us feel good, or it may not be there yet. The third aspect, confession. When you can confess even to yourself, but ideally to at least one trusted friend, you can confess some aspect of your negative behavior, then you're free from it. Because the reason we get trapped in it is we keep it in our head. And now we're feeling guilty, we're feeling a little shame. I don't want people to know I did that, I act that way, I have this characteristic or whatever. And so we become trapped, we become slaves to that negative thought called our ego that says, oh, you better be careful what you do, how you speak, what they see you do, because then they're going to know you have ego, you have judgment, you have fear, you have anger, you have whatever. But the moment you can confess it, it's like you're free. Think about it. It's almost like somebody blackmailing you. If somebody blackmailing you over a secret, the easiest way not to be blackmailed is do what? Tell the secret. You start to tell people you can't be blackmailed anymore. Then they can't hold it over you. But at the same time, then you're also free, because you're no longer then enslaved and in bondage to whatever that may be. And the beauty of that is, once you're no longer in bondage, what are you? You're free to be free. You're free to have freedom. You're free to be the real you. As long as you're being and acting the way you think they want you to be or to act or whatever, even spiritual people, even nice people, even your family, but you're still then entrapped. You're still then entrapped. So we're here this morning to wake up and to be what the Creator wants us to be free, because the universe is big. The universe is a lot bigger than we are in the physical material world. The Kabbalists teach that we, in the physical body, we are the 1%. The physical material world is 1% of reality. The true reality of the Creator's abundant universe is 99%. So the Kabbalists explain then, when we are willing to exert ourselves to be more godlike, to be more sharing, to be more tolerant and compassionate and generous and forgiving, we can only do with 1%. What does the universe then reflect back to us? 99%. Let's call it 99 times what we can do. So then every action we do, 99 times comes back to us, because the universe is that big. So that's why the great Kabbalist called the Baal Shem Tov used to tell his students, every small action we do creates a new life and a new world for us. So today, as we're understanding the true concept of freedom, what it means to be the real me that the Creator created, then let's band together. Yes, we are one-on-one with the Creator. We are created unique, but as we will work together to be the real me, the real us, then we can use our co-creator nature and we can make it a brand new world. Like the song just said, when we share and we care, we can make a world where there is no death and there is no chaos and there is no destruction. And if we commit ourselves today to start acting that way, then it's you and I, this group, who's deciding for the rest of the world to set the example of what it's like to be the real us, the real light beings, and then we can wipe away all the chaos of the world and we can reveal what the Creator put here, heaven on earth. God bless.